Hey, good evening. Welcome to another Barry Hawkins Live. I, of course, being Barry Hawkins, am glad you're here. We're continuing our series on effective development process at the team level, moving through the events that make up an effective development process. I tell people that effective development process for me over the years has meant a collection of events, roles that people play, not the ones you eat, artifacts, and a handful of metrics. And we'll be covering all of those topics in the coming weeks. We continue our journey right now in the events, that is the meetings, the interactions with the team that make up an effective development cycle. Tonight, we look at effective cycle or sprint reviews. This is an intriguing one for me because of all the different aspects of development process, sprint reviews are one of the most common and ubiquitous things that you'll see in a batch development process, a Scrum, or even similarly in XP and some of the non-Scrum batch flavors. But it's also, I see a lot of challenges and misunderstanding about the intent of a cycle or a sprint review. So tonight we're going to be looking at some of the key things that go into having an effective cycle or sprint review. What it's meant to be, who it's meant to be for, and things that can make them challenging and what you can do to address that. All right, let's get started. So first off, let me say that a sprint review or a cycle review is meant not for the team primarily. The sprint review ideally comes right before the retrospective, and the sprint retrospective or cycle retrospective is where the team takes a look at how did this development cycle go? How did we do, and not just what did we complete, what did we not complete, but how did we do at being a team together? But the sprint review is intended primarily to convey out from the team the outcome of the cycle and how it went. What happened, what got delivered, what got put on hold or taken out of the cycle, what's being carried over to the next one because we didn't finish it. So the what you're doing in the sprint review is you're intended to be talking to the people who want to know about your sprint. Now, who wants to know about it? It's an effective sprint review or cycle review is not for the team. It's meant to be for your stakeholders, and specifically meaning the people who have a say in both the content and the priority of your backlog. The dependent teams, that is, for many development teams, your work enables other teams to subsequently do their work. This is particularly true if you're a platform team or if you do upstream work like the creation of art assets, or in the case of product design UX, user flows, graphics and designs and screens that enable effective user flows. Also, your key collaborators, that is not just dependent teams, but there are also disciplines outside of software product development that depend on that work. Groups such as marketing, customer service or support, live operations. The people who have to take what you've done and ensure that it gets out there well, and if there are any issues that we have the most effective return to service or return to stability of the service or product that we can. And additionally, it can be other groups like compliance or legal, depending on the type of software that you create, particularly if you're in the medical field or security field. Often compliance review, infosec review, legal review are key steps in every story or bug that's delivered by your team. So these are the people, this is the landscape of people for whom the sprint review is meant to be. You're reviewing it with them. So have your sprint review be a focus on doing a great job at conveying the outcome of the sprint to those people. I sometimes see teams bundle, when there's a misunderstanding about this, I sometimes see teams roll together their sprint review and retrospective as if it's one and the same. And the thing is, if you don't realize that it's for other people, you can see how one would come to that conclusion, right? Because in the sprint review, you're recapping the sprint, and then in the retrospective, you as a team are reflecting on, okay, let's look at the sprint and see how did it go? How did we do it being a team? And so it does seem a bit redundant, but it's not redundant if you focus on the review being for that outward communication to others, the retrospective, your communication, reflection, inspection, and adaptation among yourselves. Now, secondly, in the sprint review, what are you meant to cover? This is another common area of challenge. First off, focus on the cycle. What work was pulled in from your backlog? What backlog work was brought in? How did that all play out? What non-backlog items happened? That is, what interrupt-driven things happened that your team had to service, which is part of the sprint. That's a massive part of what affects your schedulable capacity. It's not primarily about demos. That is the most common misconception that I see. You'll even see some people's sprint review calendar invite. It's actually titled the sprint demo, and they call it are you coming to the sprint demo? Well, ideally, I hope not, but if I am, let's go there and see how that's going. And I say that because when the focus is on demos, not all of your work goes into a demo or readily lends itself to demonstration or demo. And if the focus is a demo or demos, what I have seen is that over time, when a team's sprint review focuses on demos, is with a demo, you're typically showing the people who've showed up to your sprint review, look what we did. And they usually respond to it. And depending upon which groups showed up to your sprint review, their response to what you're making may vary. If it's something that customer support has been waiting for you to finally address, they may say, oh, good Lord, it's about time. Yay, I'm so thrilled. But for that same thing, if let's say that the CS representative couldn't make it, but someone from marketing was there and you say, we did this, they might look nonplussed because they really have no idea why that's a thing you would be working on, because they've got these upcoming marketing campaigns where millions of dollars are going into paid media and advertising spots, and they know that they're eagerly awaiting for you to get some work done so that they can start to do video capture and prepare the collateral that's going to go into those campaigns. And it seems like you're mucking about with something that I guess probably annoys some of the users. So the marketing response might be less than enthusiastic. And over time, when you have those experiences, we can't help but feel affected by how people respond to the work that we demonstrate. And if you're primarily doing demos, then we're subconsciously guiding ourselves to care about the wrong things. What we should be caring about in a sprint review is everything that happened in the sprint, the backlog work, the non-backlog work, how much capacity, conveying to your attendees, how much capacity you actually had. Those are the things that are important. And it's for this reason that I tell people, focus with your sprint review, have the content focus on the outcomes of the cycle. I usually, in the broad 4 categories, your metrics, so your throughput and your projected to completed ratio, how have those been affected as a result of this cycle? What were those metrics coming in? Because what those metrics were coming in is part of what informed the commitment that you made. As I've said earlier, focus, cover the backlog work. After all, that's what people have requested, that's gone into your backlog, moved through the queue, and now has been pulled into this cycle. Do cover the non-backlog work, because people need to know what interrupt-driven things are hitting your team during the development cycle, because it has a direct impact on the backlog, and it also gives your stakeholders, dependent teams, and key collaborators a more holistic understanding of everything that your development team does, not just what they've asked for. There's an artifact. When we get to the artifacts section, I will cover a thing called development logs. This is a thing I started about 17 years ago now. And it has a very specific format, unsurprisingly. Metrics, backlog items, non-backlog items, and available capacity are part of those, though not all. And I encourage teams to use development logs because it conveys the holistic picture. It's a visual aid to convey the holistic picture of your sprint. So stay tuned for the development log episode. In fact, I'll add a link to that the development log section of my Compendium project, where I document all of the different aspects of development process and scaling that I've developed. And when that video does come out, I'll add a link in the description down below, as well as maybe one up here. So that's development logs. Stay tuned for that. And now, am I the murderer of fun? Am I no demos ever? Absolutely not. Demos only where reasonable. That is, can a given thing that you've accomplished reasonably be demonstrated in the 25 minutes of a sprint review? Does it make sense to show it given everyone who's showing up? If so, then yeah, let's spend a little time showing it, because there's nothing like that visual, that visual confirmation of you made the thing, we're seeing the thing together, thank you for making the thing. So yes, demos, but sparingly and only where reasonable, not as the primary focus. Third, when it comes to the duration of the cycle review, 25 minutes or less. I say 25 minutes. 25 minutes should be as long as it goes, because bear in mind that on a given day in a medium to large organization, you are probably one of multiple sprint reviews that are happening that morning that your audience, stakeholders, dependent teams, key collaborators have to attend. So keep yours short. Try to ensure that it doesn't conflict with, one or more other sprint reviews if you can help it, particularly for teams that are closely related to yours. But with the 25 minutes, ensure that 5-minute buffer to give them a minute to either physically get to the next sprint review for one day when we all go back to offices, or at least some number of us do. But additionally, if it's hopping from one Zoom to the next, it's really nice to be able to go to the bathroom or get some liquids or not be looking at Zoom. So you should be able to have a solid sprint review in 25 minutes. So keep it to 25 minutes or less. Your audience will thank you. You'll tend to have more engaged and appreciative attendees. And isn't that what we want? Now, those are more tactical and directly, tangential aspects. There's also a human aspect to sprint reviews that's important to keep in mind. It's you want to connect the team, this collection of people, this development team. You want to connect the team to the people requesting the work. That is, you want the team to understand these are people that are asking and waiting for this work. When this work is done, they have work that they need to go do after that. And until they have our work, they're stuck or they're waiting. So they're not, when they seem anxious or disgruntled because something's not happening or something's getting delayed again, it's not just because they want to drive us like a pack of sled dogs. It's because they have stuff to do too. And just like we get frustrated when a given team that we're waiting on is behind on something, if it's, art assets or some API that we need to integrate and consume in our application, that's how they feel. We're all humans, and everyone's doing their best with what they have and where they're at. So, yeah, the more we bear that in mind, the better chance we are to be humans to one another, to be what we should be to one another. Now, additionally, for the people who are asking for the work, they in turn need to see that these are people that comprise this team. This team is not just a team name that you're perennially waiting on, and there's always some amount of disappointment in the responses that they give you. These are people also doing the best they can with what they have, and it's one of the reasons that conveying a holistic picture of your sprint or development cycle is important, because they need to see that what they're asking for is not the only thing you're being asked for, your team is being asked for. And what you're being asked for is not the only thing you have to deal with. It's been so long since I had a team that didn't own at least one or a few live services. And whenever that service has an incident, they are, if not the first line of response, they're usually right after the first line of response. And that's a normal and healthy part of owning an application or a service. And a healthy feedback loop for the team. But it also means that when things go unexpectedly wrong, it's going to impact, it has a chance to impact the work that they've committed to. And if you can convey that, the people listening to this update, to this cycle review, they've had things go wrong too. They know what that feels like. And if we can all bear in mind and be mindful of and remember a time when we too were in that uncomfortable, position of having to deliver disappointing news, then we're that much more set up to be understanding to one another, and to be able to treat one another with respect. You can be disappointed and upset and still be respectful and treat one another like persons. So those are my suggestions for more effective cycle and sprint reviews. So let's see what questions we have today. All right. John Mayer reporting in. How do you manage the tendency for some teams to use cycle reviews as a user acceptance testing ceremony? Oh man. Yeah, this happens. This is, that's great. I really should have even covered that in the points, because this is true. This is a common anti-pattern as well, where development teams will wait until the sprint review to show or review work that they've done for a stakeholder or a dependent team or a key collaborator. And it comes from I believe it was in extreme programming, where we first started really using the term or the concept of waiting until the last responsible moment to make a decision. That is, if you wait till the last responsible moment, you're going to have more information than if you decide as early as possible. So, a common pitfall of ours in software product development, but really in business, and I can definitely say in Western business, that deciding early means you're in control and being a leader, which is not true, because what it really means is that as you experience the fear and discomfort of uncertainty, you address that fear and uncertainty by making premature decisions. Now, waiting until your sprint review to review the work with the persons who've requested it, that is not waiting till the last responsible moment. That is waiting well beyond the last responsible moment. One, a user acceptance test and a review and sign off of work typically takes more time for an item than you have time to cover in your sprint review. There's back and forth, there may be dialogue, there may be surprises. I tell teams that user acceptance testing and review should be a task for every story or bug that's in your sprint. That is, part of finishing that work during your sprint is reviewing it with the people who've requested it to ensure that, with this user story and with the conditions of success that were captured in your backlog and now pulled into the sprint, did we accomplish what we set out to, and were we clear with one another, both the requester and the team doing the work, on the conditions of success? And if not, we want to review it as soon as possible, because, especially for work done earlier in the sprint, we have a chance to respond to that and maybe, tidy that up or correct some of those clarifications. If we wait until the sprint review, we have definitely gotten to the point where it's going to be too late. And few things are as train wreckish as coming to the end of a sprint and using your sprint review for UAT and having 2, 3, 5 stories for different people coming to your review, marketing, CS, a dependent team, coming to the sprint review and doing a very rushed UAT and having all of them say, nope, that's not what we wanted at all. It just snowballs. It can be really uncomfortable. So yes, to John's question, do not use your sprint review for UAT. Use your sprint review to holistically recap what took place in your cycle. Thank you for that. That's a great one. All right, what else do we have here? Josh Thaler had sent in. Is it demos though? No. Love you, Josh. All right, that was great. What else do we have from other sources? What about distributed teams? What do I do with a team where not everyone is co-located? This has been a part of my life since the early 2000s. Since when I first started practicing Scrum, and then a less, and then a more tailored version of that. With distributed teams, it's you rely heavily on video conferencing, and thank heavens, over the last several years, but especially during the pandemic, we've come a long way with both video conferencing tools and platforms, and individuals' comfort with them. So if you have just a few distributed team members, then you might have the in-person review, and then they are on Zoom and are up on the screen, to hear and answer questions if needed. If you're highly distributed or completely distributed, then I usually recommend holding the sprint review completely through Zoom. That is, not having some people who are there physically and then another half or more who aren't, because then you tend to the group that's physically present, they tend to circle up and communicate with one another and isolate or leave out the people who are over video conference. So if you're highly distributed, maybe go full video conference, whether that's Zoom, Google Meet, what have you, because that keeps everyone included. All right, let's see. What if key people cannot make it? Well, continuing on the vein of video, the one thing you can do is leverage what is the great ease of recording and then sharing it out. I make a regular practice of, after a sprint review, sending out an email to stakeholders, dependent teams, key collaborators, saying included the sprint review for this this cycle for this team. Here's a link to our devlog where you can actually look at the devlog artifact, and here's a video of the sprint review itself. In that way, people who couldn't make it can consume that information asynchronously and then follow up with clarifying questions if they have them. All right, have we here? What if the sprint plan got wrecked? If it got wrecked, tell the story. Tell the story of what happened. And in sprint reviews, I do encourage people to think of it as telling the story. Tell the story of what happened. Don't just, mechanically, plod through the lines in your backlog and non-backlog items. Narrate. Give it a bit of voiceover, if you will. Don't go line by line. Speak thematically. After all, you've got enough time. 20-25 minutes. You can usually cover a sprint pretty decently. So yeah, tell the story. This production incident happened. Hey, remember that thing that blew up on social media? Well, here's what we had to do to help out with that. Tell the story of what happened. The more you tell the story of how the sprint went sideways, the more likely you'll find that people are able to empathize, because again, they've had rough cycles too. How do you explain when there are a ton of interruptions? This is where, again, coming back to development logs, having development logs and using the non-backlog section of the development log and ensuring that you're filling that out and that you cover it in the sprint review, it helps tell that more holistic story of just how often and how regular and normal it is for your team to have a lot of interrupt driven work in any given cycle. And that's one of the pitfalls of using the output of some tools like Jira Sprint Report, for example. It focuses exclusively on backlog items and does not include non-backlog items. In fact, if you try to include your non-backlog items, those non-backlog items are included in your velocity, and you will artificially inflate your velocity and lead yourself to overcommitting, or at least lead the organization to think that you should be able to do more schedulable work, because now your velocity looks inflated because you've included your non-backlog items just to have them show up on the sprint report. And let's face it, the sprint report is not the most compelling visual artifact that you can get out of that particular tool or comparable tools. So have your non-backlog section and ensure that that's being captured. Well, those are the questions that we have this week around effective cycle and sprint reviews. I am so glad to have folks tuning in, and those of you who leave comments in the replays, greatly appreciated. It's always great to hear from you all. I was listening to Brene Brown Dare to Lead podcast episode with Simon Sinek, and they were talking about his latest book, and Simon talked about faith, a definition of faith that he uses, and it's faith is believing that you are part of a team even when you don't know who the other team members are. I'm butchering the quote, but that's a part of what inspires me to do these videos, because I do know who some of the team members are, because I've worked with you all. We've gotten to have that shared time together, and it was, some of your requests was what led me to finally get off my butt and get this series started. And thank you for that. It's and I believe that there are more people who care about effective development process, and that the development process should not be a recitation of rote mechanics just to turn the crank, for cogs in the machine. Effective development process should bring individuals together to be able to more effectively be a team and do the work and own the parts of your product that they own, and build more cohesion and build more trust among one another. Because the more cohesive a team is, the more that they believe in the charter and the purpose that they've been given, and the more that they have trust and empathy for one another, the freer they are to be creative, passionate, and bold and experimental with how they approach the work. So if you want your teams to do amazing work, invest in effective development process, in their nurture, and in stewarding those teams' health and effectiveness. And hey, if this resonated with you, please do like and subscribe. It helps, just like the other videos say. And share with your friends. Share it on LinkedIn, the Twitters, all the things. And we will see you all in the next episode. Thanks again. And I wish you, as always, the most effective development teams and process and team health that you can possibly have. Take care.